right, well, hello everyone and welcome to What's New in AWS Backup. By a show of hands, how many of you are currently using AWS Backup to protect your data? Oh wow, look at all that. That is amazing. Well, I'm Heather Munoz. I'm the go-to-market specialist for AWS Backup, and I'm joined with my colleague, Ken.
Hey everyone, I've got two quick thought questions for you. No need to raise your hands unless you want to. The first question is, if your company was to lose their data today, how quick would they be able to continue to resume business as normal? And the second thought question related to that is, how confident are you that you could restore that data that you lost quickly in a way that allow your business to resume business in virtually no time at all? So the reason I ask that is, as Heather said, my name is Kenneth Hui. I am a data protection solutions architect at AWS. And my job really is to help customers like you answer those two questions and to help you make sure that you're architecting a data protection solution that will help your company to be able to be resilient in the face of a potential data loss.
We're also joined today by three special guests, as you can see. They're each going to introduce themselves when it's their turn to present in a short while. Okay, so today we're going to cover why AWS Backup. Why should you use AWS Backup in your company to protect your data? We're going to talk a little bit about the reInvent or announcements and launches that we made prior to reInvent, and then we're going to talk about some of the really exciting things that we announced this week. But the most, I think, interesting part of the next hour is going to be hearing from our customers from Supercell, Liberty Mutual, and JP Morgan Chase. They're going to tell us a little bit about their data protection journey, why they chose AWS Backup, and talk about the successes that they see to date. So it's no secret that data is growing, and it's growing exponentially, right? And that data brings a tremendous amount of value, right? So that's what's fueling AI and machine learning and driving large language models and generative AI. And that data requires protection, right? And it needs that protection for disaster recovery and business continuity and governance to regulations. And designing and deploying a data protection solution is a journey and a challenge in itself. So a lot of people think data protection is many different things. So before I go any further today, I want to define what data protection means in the context of our conversation. So data protection is the process of safeguarding important data from corruption, compromise, or loss, and providing the capability to restore that data to a functional state in order to maintain business continuity. So let's start by taking a look at three different models on your screen here on how AWS Backup fits into the data protection picture. Historically, backup is done on premises in a traditional data center. You typically have backup software vendors, maybe some media servers, and dedicated backup appliances. But with the onset of cloud, a new model emerged, and it's the hybrid model, where our customers are running their workloads on-prem in their data center, but they're sending their backups to the cloud. And more of our customers are moving to that third model today. And that third model is where our customers are running the workload in the cloud, but they still need to protect that data just like they did as if it was on-site. And that's where AWS Backup comes into play, right? So AWS Backup is a fully managed service that centralizes and automates data protection across all of the supported AWS services and hybrid workloads. And it provides core data protection features, ransomware capabilities, as well as compliance insights into data protection plans. It also is a cost-effective, policy-driven service with features that simplify data management at scale all the way across the AWS landscape that you have. So Ken, tell us a little bit about the services that we support and some of the features that go along with it.
Thanks, Heather. I'm going to walk over a little bit because I want to make sure the folks sitting on the Red Rock Canyon section of the room can hear me. If you don't know what Red Rock Canyon is, look it up in Google Maps. So as Heather mentioned, a large part of what we want to do is to make sure that we are the best service to help you centralize data protection across many services. So quick show of hands, how many of you are using AWS Backup, for those of you who are, to protect more than two services? Okay, that's about right. So today we support 19 services, and that's growing. And the idea there is to make sure that instead of having to go to 19 different consoles, use 19 sets of APIs, 19 sets of scripts, you have one place where you can go and create your retention policies and set up your backup plan to protect all your resources. So that's going very wide. We also are going very deep with our integration. So for example, we support things like point-in-time recovery for Aurora. We're supporting S3 backups, increasing performance there. And the other thing we're doing in terms of integration is we have a feature called Backup Audit Manager, which is used for you to be able to see all the backups across all your resources and be able to tell you whether those backups are compliant with the regulations that you set in place. So, for example, if you need to protect your EBS volumes and your RDS databases and keep them around for 7 years, the Backup Audit Manager will be able to interrogate your environment and tell you where you have backups that are not compliant with that 7-year retention.
You can hold it. So let's talk a little bit about the use cases for AWS Backup. There's 4 main use cases. We just talked about the first one, which is Cloud Native Backup, which can simplify the management of your data protection across multiple AWS services. Now, when it comes to compliance and governance, AWS Backup works combined with AWS Backup Audit Manager to audit and report on the compliance of the data protection policies to help meet your business regulations. So can you talk a little bit about the next 2?
Yeah, so disaster recovery, ransom recovery, all very hot topics today. I would argue very much related, although a bit different. What studies show us and history tells us is if a business is down for roughly, let's say 30 days, without being able to resume normal business, 90% of those businesses never actually come back. So it's extremely important that you have backups that you can rely on to do restores in the event that there's some kind of attack. And there are different features we created, such as Vault Lock, that enable you to make sure that your backups are immutable, to make sure that they cannot be deleted by a malicious attacker, so that you can have reliable backups to restore from. And we, again, with things like Backup Audit Manager, we're actually able to tell you whether your backups are being locked or not, so that you can ensure that something doesn't fall through the crack. So next, I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking about both launches that have happened this year, recent launches, and then we'll talk a bit about what we announced this week at reInvent. So I won't go through all of these, but you can see here where this is very much around what I said of increasing the depth of what we're covering in terms of resources that we're backing up, things like supporting continuous or point-in-time restores for Aurora, being able to increase performance on our S3 backups. And in addition, we're creating additional value-added capabilities around those backups. We announced the launch a preview for something we're calling Logical Air Gap Vault, which is a way for you to be able to centralize your backup copies in a single vault, and that single vault can then be shared with another account. And the value of that is if you are compromised and you are not confident in restoring your backups to the same account, you can actually create a new account that you know hasn't been compromised, and you can share that vault with that account and restore it directly into the account. In addition, one of the things that customers often ask about is supporting tags. Hopefully all of you are using tags in AWS and using tags with AWS Backup. So one of the things we launched this year is the ability to, when you apply tags on your resources, when you restore them, we'll apply those same tags back to the restored resources. Okay, so let's get to what we announced this week. So one of the things we heard from our customers frequently is, hey, I want better visibility into my backups. I want to be able to see my backup and restore jobs and be able to see what the status of those jobs are. So with this new improved console experience, the jobs dashboard, you'll be able to see in one place all the backup jobs in your environment across your entire organization, and be able to, we'll point out areas where backups may have been failing, so you can see trouble areas and be able to respond quickly and troubleshoot. The second one is what we call restore testing. So probably most of you have heard this phrase or this question. if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? So similarly, if you did your backup, but you can't restore it, did you actually do a backup? Right? Because at the end of the day, this is not about, that's why we use the terms restore time objective and restore point objective, because that's what's important. It's not the restores. No one actually cares about backup point objective or backup point time. So what we're doing so we think that the best way to ensure that your backups are restorable is for you to actually test the restores. Right? But that can be a painful manual process. So restore testing, what we've done is we essentially can create a run book that will tell AWS Backup what you want to restore, when you want to restore it, and how you want it restored. And we'll automatically run those restore tests for you. We'll track the time and the progress of those restores and give it back to you in a report. And then we'll actually terminate those resources after the restore so you're not incurring additional costs that you don't want. And then lastly, how many of you would like to optimize your costs for backups? Okay, I'm surprised not every hand is raised. Let me know who you are. I can tell you more things you should back up. But one of our top requests is from customers who ask, hey, I have some EBS snapshots that I need to keep for a very long time. I just recently spoke with a customer who's a bank, and they have a requirement that they have to take annual backups of all the EBS snapshots, and those backups have to be retained for 7 years to 10 years. And obviously, you're basically paying the cost of those snapshots for 84 to 120 months every month. So what we announced this week is we're supporting EBS Snapshots Archive. It is a way for you to take these snapshots that you want to keep for the long term and store it in a cold storage environment so that you can reduce the amount of spend while keeping those snapshots.
So just a couple of fun facts about AWS Backup. We do currently have over 130,000 customers that are protecting 1.8 exabytes of data across their application data at AWS. So as I mentioned earlier today, my favorite part of this session is actually some of our customers that are here today. So without further ado, please welcome Leo from Supercell to the stage to hear about his data protection journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to hear how Supercell does data protection. My name is Leo Linnamaa. I work as a senior server engineer at Supercell. Supercell, as you know, is a great mobile gaming company with around 500 of us with our headquarters at Helsinki, Finland. And with our mission, we have been able to create multiple great hit games. Maybe you have already played some of them, like Clash of Clans or Heyday. With over 200 million monthly active users and over 5 billion installations across all of our games, we have accumulated lots of data which we want to protect. My team, the server tech team, exists to support game engineers at the game teams. We do features that are common for all of our games. We also help them to operate the games in the cloud. One task for us was to consolidate the disaster recovery for the games. The main challenge in Supercell is the large scale of things. In order to run our production to meet the activity requirements that come from the very active player base, we need to run our environment with multiple tens of database clusters side by side in order to meet up with the load. This also means that for the backup solution, we need to be able to create the backups simultaneously from all of the clusters to reduce the inconsistency. At the same time, we want to create the backup so that there is no performance impact for the players. We also wanted to consolidate our existing solutions under the same umbrella. For us, those storage services would be S3, DynamoDB, and Aurora MySQL. We wanted to prepare for multiple different recovery scenarios, some that support our daily operations, but we also wanted to prepare for the very worst of the scenarios, where we can lose the AWS account or the region. At Supercell, each of the game team operates as an independent island. Therefore, we knew from the beginning with that the solution would be deployed separately for each game team because they have different requirements and configurations. At the same time, we wanted to provide easy configurability for the game server engineers. Naturally, we wanted to improve our recovery time objective and recovery point objective from the previous state. With the recovery points, you need to be a little bit careful because you don't want to store all of them for weeks, months, and years for cost reasons. This is the solution we came up with. Let's look at the accounts first. On your right, you will see the production account. This is where we run the production. In the middle, you will see the backup account, where we store the backups for long-term storage. Access to this account is typically restricted, and people do not have access to it. On your left, you will see a restoration account, where we can do a fully failover environment of our production, or practice restoration whenever we need to. With AWS Professional Services, we implemented a Terraform module that, once deployed, is very easy for the game server engineers to use. All they need to do is to add a tag to a resource they want to protect. The value of the tag will imply how often backup will be made, how long it will be stored, and in some cases, where it will be stored. They can also modify the value whenever they want, and the next iteration of the backup plan will take that change into use, giving them full control of the cost of the solution. Once a backup has been taken to the local backup vault, we copy that cross-account and cross-region for better safety. Not all of the AWS services support this as a one operation, so we have some event bridges and Lambda solutions to support our journey of the backups and coordinate the backups to correct region. From the very beginning the restoration was going to be the main beef for us. When you have multiple tens of database clusters and other resources on top of that, you definitely do not want to click them through the UI and try to find the correct resource points and parameters for all of them. That's very error-prone, and it's also slow. We also found out that providing automation for this helps us to test the solution more often because it's less effort to do so. Again, with AWS Professional Services, we implemented a Terraform module that this time deploys a set of AWS step functions. These functions do many operations for us, but two of them are essential. First of all, we can give a time range for the function. We can say, for example, give us a backup from Monday 8 a.m. to Monday 12 a.m. It will find the latest backup for all of our resources during that time frame and start the restoration of those automatically in parallel. The second most important thing for us is the parallel restoration, which is very efficient. When we did some testing, we realized that when we restore 10 Aurora database clusters side by side and compare that time to restoration of 100 database clusters side by side, we realized that the time it takes is very, very similar. So this also helps us with the recovery time objective we have set. After you have restored your data, you still need to deal with the inconsistency of the data. What I mean by this is that you are probably going to have some transactions that were able to write data to cluster A, but the reference to that data is missing from cluster B, or vice versa. You still need to find a way to recover and fix these data points. How do you do that? It's up to you, and depends on your structure and application. What's next for us? Well, AWS Backup keeps adding new services to their portfolio. Our teams will keep adding them to our users. And so we will need to add support for those for our restoration tooling. Also, we have some ideas how to further improve the MySQL recovery point objective and also the cost factor. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Oops. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you, Leo, for sharing that. Next up, I think we have Ted from Liberty Mutual to talk about how they are using AWS Backup in their environment.
All right, thanks, Ken. My name is Ted Gilsonen. Let's get it right. My name is Ted Gilsonen. I'm a technology architect with Liberty Mutual Insurance. I'm part of our Global Risk Solutions business unit, and I'm part of our Cloud and Engineering Excellence IT team. Now, some of you may have heard of Liberty Mutual before, thanks to our friends Limu, Emu, and Doug. Come on. But we're much more than that. We're number 86 on the Fortune 100, and we're the 5th largest global P&C insurer, and we have $50 billion in annual consolidated revenue. Now, I'm going to stop there and highlight this, the past couple of bullets we have here. Now, we have about 50,000 employees and about 5,000 tech employees. So we're a fairly large enterprise. I mean, I know there's some larger ones here, but we're fairly large. And as such, we have a decent amount of data to back up. How much data? Well, I guess it depends. And I'm going to be truthful and say I don't actually really know because it's always changing. So we took a bit of a swag across a bunch of our AWS accounts to put this together. But these slides were due a while ago, so it's probably actually a lot more than this now. But it's a decent amount of data, right? So at this point, we've established that we're a fairly large enterprise. And we've established that we have a decent amount of data to back up. But what you might not have realized is that until fairly recently, there was a period of time when we were actually not great at backing up our data. So not good, right? So the question, well, actually, so first let me get into the background as to why. So like a lot of large enterprises, we started out doing more sort of like waterfall, project planning type of stuff. App teams would deploy their stuff to our data centers, which we had scattered around various places. And in order to get servers to deploy their stuff, they would create a request to the sysadmins, and then they would have to specify their disaster recovery plans and their backup plans and et cetera. But really, actually, at that point, they didn't have to think about it a whole lot. They just said, this is what we need, and they would get it. We had various folks in our data centers, DBAs, sysadmins, whoever, who would actually take care of a lot of that stuff. So at this point, right, the world has changed. So we have more of a agile methodologies nowadays, with more of a DevOps mindset, and we deploy, obviously, to the cloud and not to our data centers. This means that app teams, in addition to deploying their apps, also need to deploy the infrastructure associated with the apps, which they weren't used to doing, including any backup or disaster recovery infrastructure that they need. Now, to throw an additional sort of wrench on top of this, our global cybersecurity team put in a requirement in the cloud saying that people need to, in addition to standard backups, need to have what we call a fail-safe backup. Now, in AWS, actually, in a lot of their architecture diagrams and stuff, actually refer to it as a data bunker account. It's the same sort of thing. It's effectively another account that is completely separate from the source account. And it's a place to hold backups, as sort of a safe spot in case of account compromise or a ransomware attack in the original account. So anyway, we said, all right, teams are already deploying their apps, they're deploying their infrastructure, right? They can just pick up these requirements for backup and disaster recovery and this fail-safe. They can just do that too, right? Not really. Didn't happen as we were hoping, so we were probably a little naive in that respect. So we have a central data protection and management team as well, and they tried to put together a process that perhaps might make this easier for teams. And they did it using a third-party tool, a vendor tool, and they rolled it out, and unfortunately, they didn't really have a whole lot of success with adoption of that either. As a matter of fact, we had at one point less than 3% fail-safe adoption, which is really not good, right? So why was this the case? So we found out that one of the main problems here is that teams are saying there's a high effort for us to implement our infrastructure for this, for backups, for fail-safe, whatever. And development teams are really not into this type of stuff. They want to create their apps and do their development, provide business value through their apps. But infrastructure type stuff isn't really high on their priority list. And while we have a lot of really good developers, not everybody has a full grasp of how backup works in AWS and how often they should back up, whatever else. So they didn't necessarily do it. We received questions from app teams about this too. We had app teams say things like, well, doesn't AWS just do this for us? Well, no. I mean, we all know the shared responsibility model, right? We are responsible for our data in the cloud. AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. And then, well, storage is really durable, right? Why do we even have to do this kind of thing? Well, durability, most storage is pretty durable, but durability does not equal, backup or disaster recovery. So this led to, a lot of frustration and angst. We also ran into security findings because people weren't meeting their fail-safe requirements. We actually had a team that lost some data in S3 because they weren't backing things up. Thankfully, it wasn't a catastrophic thing, but it was a pretty big red flag. So we clearly needed to solve this problem. So my team partnered with our central data protection and management team to try to come up with a solution. Coincidentally, right when we started to do this, we had an architect come to us from our global risk solution security team who said, we'd love to be compliant. We'd love to be able to do all this stuff that we need to do, but it's just too much. All we want to do is just tag it. If we could just tag it and everything works like magic after that, then that would be perfect for us. So we said, oh, the light bulb went off, and we said, all right, well, there's an opportunity here. So the opportunity was we needed to simplify this process for our app teams. App teams don't want to deploy their own backup infrastructure. They shouldn't have to. Security compliance should be automatic, should come baked in with this process. Process needs to be consistent across the enterprise. We're guilty sometimes of having local solutions to things. This was too important. It needed to be an enterprise-level solution. And also, we had business units sometimes have specific requirements over and above the enterprise requirements for backup. So they needed to have delegated admin to be able to handle that as well. So we thought about what we could do here, and then we realized, actually AWS Backup checks all these boxes for us. So we said, all right, let's implement AWS Backup. So what did we do? Well, at a very high level here, our data protection management team has an AWS account, and so we worked with that team, and we got delegated admin set up for AWS Backup within the AWS organizations. There, we deployed backup policies. These backup policies were keyed off of tags, and the tags we used were keyed off of our disaster recovery tiering, which really equates to app RPO. These policies were then attached to the various application portfolio accounts, the accounts that the application teams used, and where there they became backup plans. We also defined backup vaults associated with these different plans. We have a vault for the backups that we do for the same region, which is just sort of the standard backups. And then we have a vault for backups that we're also copying across region for disaster recovery purposes, as well as that bunker failsafe account vault that I talked about before. Just going a little bit deeper into this, within an actual application account, we have these different backup policies that become these plans at the top level, defined at the RPO or disaster recovery tier, and the various corresponding vaults that I just talked about. A couple things we don't show here. We did set up a delegated admin for the different cloud teams of our different business units to be able to create policies over and above the standard enterprise stuff for their specific requirements. We're working on implementing Vault Lock to create immutable backups, especially in those fail-safe accounts. And we also have lifecycle policies basically attached on all these different plans because we want to retain the stuff we need to retain, according to our records retention schedules, but we don't want to retain stuff for too long because then we're paying for the storage, right? So, so that was what we did. What was the outcome of this? Well, so app teams are much happier, much higher adoption of backups. They don't have to do a whole lot now. All they got to do is tag. We have much better coverage now for disaster recovery and security requirements. Security findings that app teams got because they weren't doing our fail-safe bunker backups, they can now remediate those. They just need to tag. Magic happens. They can get that finding removed. Developers have more time to work on the stuff they really want to work on rather than just this infrastructure type stuff. And it greatly simplified the process for us because now it's all native AWS stuff. We don't need to worry about dealing with third parties or licensing of other tools or whatever else. So developers are very happy with this solution. But don't just take my word for it. I'll tell you, when we rolled this out, we put out a communication to all the different developers and said, all right, here's the new things you can do. All you got to do is tag it. Here's all the information you need. We started to get some feedback. Here's a quote from one of the software engineers on our enterprise data enablement team. It's similar to a lot of other quotes that we got from a lot of other developers. So clearly the development community is much happier with this solution nowadays, which makes us a lot happier as well. So thank you everybody for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your reInvent.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ted. I really liked how you got your developers on board with your solution. So next up, we have Ruchir from JPMorgan Chase.
Hey everyone, my name is Ruchir Patel. I'm the General Manager for Data Protection and Recovery at JPMorgan Chase. We've got over 250,000 employees, and we've got about 50,000 technologists globally supporting millions of customers worldwide. We're a leading global team. We are leading a global team towards successfully protecting the firm's most critical data. We've got about 120 million backup jobs and about several hundred petabytes of data with higher than industry standard as far as backup success rate. So what are we doing? So JPMorgan Chase is moving a greater portion of our applications and technology estate to the public cloud, specifically partnering with AWS. We're trying to harness the ability of the cloud as far as scalability, flexibility, and the resilient infrastructure. This is enabling our applications to adapt and modernize with speed and excellence. When we look at why we're doing this, it's to obviously further business enablement, shorten our speed to market through acceleration of technology delivery, to better resiliency and availability and improve and utilize secure capabilities, cost efficiency, have infrastructure flexibility that's native with AWS, be able to spin up, spin down workloads. And the firm's growing at a rapid pace, and we wanted to ensure that we can utilize the public cloud that gives the business the burstability. So a lot of our business is based on seasonality. If you think about credit card transactions, and like we just passed Black Friday, we want to be able to burst up and down and meet those needs of our customers, even those that use AWS for online purchases. And the power of AWS allows us to meet the demand of the customer through that flexibility and scalability, providing elasticity. So the ask, the challenges we had when we were working through this with AWS was to understand, as you heard my colleague up here mention, durability versus recoverability versus the number of copies. One of the things we talked to the account team a lot about 2 years ago was we look at the number of copies you have and how quickly we can recover that data versus just uptime and durability. So there's a lot of dialogue back and forth amongst ourselves and the account team on understanding what was good for a highly regulated financial services industry versus other customers. The transition was actually pretty easy for us. The team was fairly agile. You would think that AWS in general, when you're working with them, they're not going to be able to adopt. But you'll be surprised if you work with the account teams and the architects and the product managers. We all have similar asks. It's just asking them to be able to do what you need to do and then prioritizing it. And the team's been really, really good to work with and been fairly flexible and agile in that sense. From a desired business outcomes, we wanted to make sure that we had a centralized product with some decentralized controls. So we want to be able to place the power and optionality into our customer base and make sure that they can still abide by our regulations and controls without having to consider that, right? And saying, we provide you choices, you just use them, and you're going to comply. We want to make sure that we remove the friction points for slow application migration. So we want to make sure that the services that we use that Ken had mentioned, they've got like 19 services they protect. So we work with them as we light up a service within JP Morgan that we can also work with them to make sure that we can protect that natively in AWS. We wanted to make sure that we could take advantage of the immense amount of telemetry and mimic the expected outcomes we have on-prem and off-prem. A lot of our applications are transitioning, so they're not cloud native. So that means we need to have the same feature and functionality parity for on-prem and off-prem. And working with AWS, we've been able to easily do that. We also wanted to anticipate standard control changes, so we work with the account team and the specialists within AWS to understand regulatory requirements we have, but also upcoming regulatory requirements. So we partner with them to understand regional requirements and what needs to be done to ensure that as we turn up other regions and light up workloads there, how we can partner together to make sure that we don't violate any of those regulations. The how. JP Morgan, we've essentially constructed an internal product offering utilizing the backup service. I mentioned earlier, as we light up services within AWS, we ensure that we can natively back those up unless there's something that we can't provide together, and then we would look to a third party. But up till now, we've been able to partner together and meet all the needs that we've had so far. We wanted to retain as much of the flexibility with AWS. That was one of the reasons it was key for us to use the native AWS backup services. How we've delivered, it's a mutually beneficial partnership between us and AWS. There's constant communication. There's a good feedback loop. We meet with them regularly. We have lockstep EBCs on a quarterly basis. We also have weekly meetings with them as well. Share the joint roadmaps between what we're doing from a business perspective and a technology perspective and where they're going. Their well-documented services actually help us lead to reduce time to market. It also allows us to ensure that when we have anything that we're publishing or that we're doing internally, we have a lot of transparency, and there's end-to-end account ownership, end-to-end ownership between us and accountability between both companies. I'll turn it back over to Ken.
Yep. Thanks.
We need the clicker. It's you.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you. All right. So look, thank you, everyone, for your sharing about how you're using AWS Backup in your company. So we're going to do I'll do a quick summary of some of the things we've heard, and then we'll actually have, looks like some good Q&A time for our special guest and also for the backup team. So first of all, what you've heard, I think, from Auth up here is that centralization is very important. The ability, especially, to be able to, from a central IT perspective, be able to apply, develop backup policies that you can push down across the org and across different business units, so that you're making sure that you have consistency in the backups that you take and the restores, and the ability to also have visibility into that centralized policy and how it's behaving in your environment. And then the other thing you heard, as you would imagine from these industries, there are some compliance requirements that have to be met. And that's one thing that AWS Backup is built for, this ability to, again, give you reports, let you see how we are compliant with different regulations that your company may have. And then optimization was something that was talked about. We want to make sure that you're as efficient as possible. We don't want you spending a lot of time doing scripting and manual work. I spoke with one customer this week that they were using scripting to protect their environment, their database environment without AWS Backup, and they were changing the scripts every 3 months based on changes. So we don't want you to do that. And then finally, ransomware protection is obviously a big thing that we need to tackle. And AWS Backup has capabilities that we've built in, like Vault Lock, like the central data bunker architecture that was mentioned, that allow you to do that. And we've actually published those reference architectures for all of you to look at. So all you need to do is Google or Bing, whatever you use, AWS Backup reference architecture, and you'll see a PDF that has four reference architectures that we've seen work in custom environments that let you both help you centrally manage AWS Backup and also create that data bunker architecture to help protect you from ransomware events.
Yes, so today we have all learned about AWS Backup and how it can help you and your company on your data protection journey. But we want to encourage you to further your education, and AWS Backup is part of the storage grouping in our education portal, the AWS Skills Builder. So please go out there and take the learning plan, increase your knowledge with those ramp-up guides, and then make it official by demonstrating your knowledge and achieving a AWS storage badge for education. We have had multiple sessions throughout the week. I know it is Thursday. It's been a really long week focused on AWS Backup. I think there's still a couple sessions left today, maybe even in the morning. There will be all the breakout sessions are recorded, and they'll be available for you to consume on YouTube shortly, actually probably by the end of the week. So thank you. Please go out there, take your survey that is in your app, and if you have any other feedback, we'll be over here on the side of the stage and be able to answer any more questions that you have.
Thank you.